A woman with an ordinary appearance wearing jeans and a grey t-shirt is ignored by elegant salespeople at a luxury car dealership. When she leaves humiliated, a man in an impeccable suit enters the place. The manager approaches with a smile, unaware that he has just lost the biggest deal of the year. The Elite Motors dealership gleamed under the afternoon sun. Gleaming Mercedes-Benz cars lined up like jewels beneath perfect lighting. Inside the air-conditioned showroom, salespeople in pristine navy suits circled like sharks in shallow waters, sizing up potential clients with a single glance. Mark, the sales manager, adjusted his tie while observing the woman who had just walked in. Shoulder-length blonde hair, a plain grey t-shirt, faded jeans, and ordinary sneakers. The black leather purse she carried seemed to be the only item that stood out from her unassuming appearance. Her hesitant steps clashed with the polished marble floor. She walked slowly among the luxury cars, admiring a silver Mercedes-Benz in particular, with a spark in her eyes that Mark interpreted as naivety. He made a subtle gesture to Jason, the newest salesperson, who rolled his eyes before reluctantly approaching her. "Can I help you?" Jason asked with a mechanical smile that didn't reach his eyes. The woman, Jessica Miller, smiled shyly. "Yes, please. I'm interested in this model." She pointed to the silver Mercedes. "I'd like to take it for a test drive if possible." Jason shot a quick glance at Mark before replying, "Of course, ma'am, but for test drives we need to verify some information first. This particular model costs over $100,000. "I understand," Jessica replied, opening her purse. "I have my documents right here. And we also need to verify your financial capacity," Jason continued, emphasizing the words with a hint of disdain. "We have strict protocols for access to our premium vehicles." Mark stepped closer, taking control of the situation. His perfectly tailored suit seemed to exude authority. Around him, 3 other salespeople watched the scene with arrogant expressions. "Ma'am, this showroom caters to a very specific clientele," Mark explained with false politeness. "Perhaps we can direct you to our used car branch on Main Avenue. We have more affordable options over there." Jessica felt her face burn with embarrassment as the men in suits stared at her. One of them chuckled quietly, whispering something to the colleague beside him. The air of superiority in the room was suffocating. On the other side of the showroom, a young receptionist named Emily watched the scene uncomfortably. Unlike the salespeople, her uniform was simple and her demeanor was kind. She had only been with the company for 3 months and hadn't yet been fully shaped by the predatory culture of the place. "I understand your concern about protocols," Jessica replied calmly, maintaining her dignity. "But I'd really like to test this model before making my decision." Mark laughed openly now, glancing at his fellow salespeople. "Mrs. Miller, right? Let me be clear. It's not just about protocols. This vehicle requires a certain client profile." He gestured subtly at her simple clothes. "Do you understand what I mean? We don't want to waste your time or ours." Emily approached timidly, holding a glass of water. "Would you like something to drink while you talk?" she offered kindly. Mark shot Emily a disapproving look. "That won't be necessary, Emily. The lady was just leaving, wasn't she?" Jessica smiled gratefully at the young woman and accepted the glass of water. "Thank you for your kindness." "Look," Mark continued with growing impatience, "let's be straight. This car costs more than most people make in years. It's a machine for executives, celebrities, successful people. We don't offer test drives to just anyone who walks through the door." Emily lowered her eyes, visibly embarrassed by her boss's behavior. Jessica noticed the young woman's discomfort and gently touched her arm. "Don't worry," she whispered to Emily. "It's not your fault." Turning back to Mark, Jessica kept her composure. "I understand your position, but I'd like to leave my contact information in case you change your mind." Sure, Mark replied with a condescending smile, taking the card she offered without even looking at it. "We'll reach out when we launch our budget line." Jason and the other salespeople laughed openly now. Jessica took a deep breath, thanked Emily one last time and walked toward the exit with her head held high, despite the humiliation. Through the glass doors, she could be seen getting into a modest Honda Civic parked across the street. She had barely closed the car door when she saw an imposing black Bentley pull into the dealership's parking lot, the vehicle parked precisely in the spot reserved for VIP clients. Inside the showroom, the atmosphere shifted instantly as a tall man in an elegant suit walked in. Michael Miller, CEO of Miller Investments, one of the largest investment firms in the country, strode with the confidence of someone used to commanding any room he entered. Mark immediately straightened his posture, nervously adjusting his tie. "Mr. Miller, what an honor to have you at our dealership." He practically ran to greet the newcomer, closely followed by the other salespeople. "I'm looking for a gift for my wife," Michael announced in a firm voice. "Something special for our wedding anniversary." "Absolutely, sir. We have exactly what you're looking for," Mark replied enthusiastically. "We just received the new S-Class model, exclusive, only 3 units in the entire country." Michael nodded, looking around the showroom. "Actually, my wife mentioned a specific model, a silver Mercedes." "Ah yes, the S-Class AMG." Mark pointed to the same car Jessica had been admiring minutes earlier. "An excellent choice, sir. Would you like to see the specs?" "I would. My wife was here earlier to take it for a test drive, but..." Michael frowned, glancing at his wristwatch. "That's strange." We agreed to meet here. A heavy silence fell over the showroom. Mark swallowed hard, suddenly pale. "Your wife, sir," he stammered. "Yes, Jessica Miller. She wanted to test the car before we made the purchase, always very cautious with our investments." Michael smiled with pride. "That's how we built our fortune, you know? Careful with every penny." Emily, who had been watching the scene from a distance, stepped forward bravely. "Mr. Miller, your wife was here, but..." Michael raised an eyebrow, his expression hardening. "She wasn't well treated, sir," Emily finished, ignoring the deadly glares she received from Mark and the other salespeople. Michael's face darkened. "What do you mean?" Mark quickly intervened. "There was a misunderstanding, Mr. Miller. If the lady who was here was your wife, we certainly didn't recognize her. She didn't mention your name, and she was told the car was for a certain client profile," Emily continued, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. "And they suggested she go to the used car lot on Main Avenue for more affordable options." The showroom plunged into absolute silence. Mark looked like he had seen a ghost. "I see," Michael said, his voice dangerously calm. "So you judged my wife by her appearance, assumed she couldn't afford a luxury car because she was dressed casually." "Mr. Miller, I can explain," Mark began. But Michael raised a hand, silencing him. "Jessica and I started from nothing 20 years ago. She drove the same budget car for 15 years, while we reinvested every penny into our business. Even today, she prefers to spend on social causes rather than designer clothes." Michael looked Mark straight in the eyes. "It's exactly that kind of humility and financial intelligence that allowed us to build a fortune." Mark paled even further as Michael pulled his phone from his pocket and made a call. "Jessica, darling." "Yes, I'm at the dealership. No, I won't be buying the car here. In fact, I think we should reconsider the corporate partnership as well." Michael paused, listening. "Yes, apparently our company cars are no longer welcome for maintenance here. I'll talk to the team about transferring our fleet elsewhere." The sales manager looked on the verge of collapse. Elite Motors had a multi-million-dollar contract for the maintenance of Miller Investments' vehicle fleet, over 200 executive cars. It was the dealership's biggest contract. "Mr. Miller, please," Mark pleaded. "It was a terrible misunderstanding. We can fix this. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way," Michael replied coldly. "Emily, was it?" He turned to the young receptionist. "You were the only decent person in this place. Could you give me your card?" 2 weeks later, the atmosphere at Elite Motors was completely different. The cancellation of the contract with Miller Investments had only been the beginning. Michael Miller, a prominent figure in business circles, had shared his experience with other CEOs. Sales plummeted, and the regional director demanded explanations. Mark was demoted from his position as sales manager. Jason and 2 other salespeople were fired. The showroom, once vibrant, now felt empty and dull under the artificial lights. In his new role as a regular salesperson, Mark felt the weight of his fall. His impeccable suit now felt like a disguise, and his arrogant confidence had been replaced by constant anxiety. "There's a call for you online too," the new receptionist informed him with professional coldness. It was an elderly customer, explaining in a confused manner that she wanted to see a car for her granddaughter, who had just graduated. Mark took a deep breath, ready to dismiss her, when he remembered his new, precarious position. "Of course, ma'am. When would you and your granddaughter like to come by?" he replied, forcing kindness into his voice. The next day, a woman nearly 80 years old walked into the dealership, leaning on an ornate cane. She wore simple but clean, well-kept clothes. By her side, A young woman in a wheelchair smiled shyly. The old Mark would have passed them off to another salesperson. The new Mark forced a smile and approached. "Mrs. Johnson? I'm Mark. We spoke on the phone yesterday." "Oh yes, and this is my granddaughter Lily. She just graduated from med school," the woman explained with evident pride. "We want a safe car for her to get to and from the hospital during her shifts." Mark looked at the young woman in the wheelchair, momentarily unsure of how to proceed. She noticed his discomfort and smiled. "I've had paraplegia since I was 12, Lily explained gently, "but I drive with hand controls. I need a model that can accommodate those modifications." I'm not sure which models would work," Mark admitted, recognizing his own ignorance. "Can we look at ones with enough space for the chair and accessible controls?" Lily suggested, without any hostility. Over the next 2 hours, Mark discovered a world he had never considered. Lily patiently explained her specific needs, educating him about automotive adaptations for people with disabilities. The grandmother shared stories about how her granddaughter had overcome the accident that left her paraplegic, turning tragedy into motivation to become a doctor. "She graduated with honors," Mrs. Johnson said, wiping tears of pride. "Top of her class." Mark listened with growing admiration. This young woman had faced more challenges in her short life than he could ever imagine, yet she radiated kindness and determination. "You know," Lily commented while they examined the third car, "a lot of dealerships don't even bother to properly assist us. They assume people with disabilities can't or shouldn't drive." I'm sorry to hear that," Mark replied, feeling a pang of shame as he realized he might have been one of those indifferent salespeople. In the days that followed, Mark researched extensively about automotive adaptations. He called experts, visited modification shops, and even watched videos of people with various disabilities driving. When Lily and her grandmother returned for a second visit, he had prepared a full dossier of viable options. "You didn't have to do all this," Lily said, visibly touched by the effort. "Yes, I did," Mark replied sincerely. "It's my job to understand my clients' needs, all of them." By the end of the week, Mark had not only sold a car to Lily, but also proposed a special sales program for clients with specific mobility needs to the board, a niche ignored by the dealership and its competitors. His proposal was met with initial skepticism, but Mark was determined. For the first time in his career, he saw beyond commissions. He saw people, not just wallets. "It's not just about selling cars," he explained to the regional director, with a passion that surprised even himself. "It's about providing independence and dignity. And yes, there's a substantial market being overlooked." Surprisingly, his initiative was approved as a pilot project. The hard work and new perspective began to transform Mark from the inside out. He stopped judging clients by their appearances and started truly listening to their needs. One afternoon, while organizing promotional materials for the new program, Mark received a notification. A potential client had scheduled a visit to see the adaptable models. The name on the system made his heart race: Jessica Miller. Mark felt his stomach drop as he saw Jessica Miller walking into the dealership. She moved with the same simplicity as before, wearing jeans and a casual blouse, carrying the same black purse. But now, knowing who she was, Mark noticed the subtle confidence in her posture, the sharp intelligence in her gaze. At her side was a young woman in a wheelchair, Lily. Mark felt a shiver of realization. "Mrs. Miller," he approached nervously, "welcome to Elite Motors." Jessica studied him for a moment, clearly recognizing him. "Mark, right. I see you still work here." "Yes, but in a different position," he replied with humility. Gathering his courage, he added, "I'd like to apologize for the way I treated you before. It was unforgivable." Jessica watched him for several long seconds before responding. "I'm here because of the adaptive vehicle program. Lily told me about it. She recently bought a car here." "Yes, I had the privilege of helping her," Mark replied, looking at Lily with genuine respect. "What she didn't tell you," Jessica continued, "is that I run the Miller Foundation for Inclusive Mobility. We fund vehicle adaptations for people with disabilities who can't afford the costs." Mark felt a wave of surprise. "I didn't know." "Few people do," Jessica smiled slightly. "I prefer to keep a low profile about my philanthropic work." Lily moved her wheelchair forward, joining the conversation. Mark developed this program almost single-handedly. He really made an effort to understand the needs of people like me. Jessica looked at Mark with renewed consideration. "Is that true?" "Lily and her grandmother taught me a lot," Mark admitted. I realized how much I was missing out on by judging people based on their appearance. How many opportunities I wasted, how many human connections I ignored. Over the next 2 hours, Mark presented his program to Jessica. He showed the research he had done, the partnerships he was developing with adaptation shops, and his plan to train the sales team to properly assist people with different needs. Jessica listened attentively, asking insightful questions and suggesting improvements. By the end of the presentation, she seemed genuinely impressed. "You've truly turned a negative experience into something positive," she commented. "That's admirable." "I'm still learning," Mark replied sincerely, "and I still have a lot to improve." "I have a proposal," Jessica said after a moment of reflection. "Our foundation is looking for dealership partners for a funding program. We could start with Elite Motors as a pilot project." Mark was momentarily speechless. "After how we treated you here, why would you give us that chance?" "Because I see an opportunity for genuine transformation," Jessica replied. "You could have left things as they were, continued with the old practices, but you chose to change. You looked beyond appearances and started building something meaningful." The regional director, who had quietly approached during the conversation, looked equally surprised. "Mrs. Miller, it's an honor to reconsider a business relationship with your foundation." Jessica raised a hand. "My partnership will be exclusively with Mark's program, and on one condition. Emily, the receptionist who was kind to me, must be promoted to coordinate the project alongside him." "Emily no longer works here," the director admitted uncomfortably. "She resigned after the incident." "Find her?" Jessica replied simply. "Offer her the position and a fair salary. People with integrity are rare in this industry." 2 weeks later, a launch event was held for the new Inclusive Mobility Program, a partnership between Elite Motors and the Miller Foundation. The dealership was unrecognizable. Colorful banners, accessibility ramps in every area, and a staff fully trained in accessibility. Mark, now the program director, wore a simpler suit, but his posture radiated a different kind of confidence. Not the arrogance of before, but the calm assurance of someone who had found purpose. At his side, Emily, hired as the administrative coordinator, smiled as she checked the final details. Michael and Jessica Miller arrived discreetly, blending in with the guests without fanfare. Among those present were Lily, her grandmother, and dozens of other people with various disabilities, all potential beneficiaries of the program. During her opening speech, Jessica surprised everyone by sharing the story of her first visit to the dealership. "I could have simply walked away and never come back," she said, "but I believe people can change, that they deserve a second chance when they show genuine remorse and a willingness to improve." She looked directly at Mark. "Some need to fall to learn how to rise with greater wisdom." At the end of the event, as the guests mingled among the adapted cars, Mark found himself alone with Jessica for a moment. "I'd like to ask something personal, if I may," he said. "Why didn't you correct my assumption? Why didn't you say who you were?" Jessica smiled subtly. "A person's worth isn't in their name, title, or bank account. I wanted to be treated with dignity for who I am, not for what I have. That taught me the most important lesson of my life," Mark confessed. "Before I saw people as walking wallets. Now I see stories, struggles, dreams." At that moment, Lily approached in her wheelchair. The first client just signed, a single mom with a teenage son who has cerebral palsy. She was crying with joy. She never imagined she could provide that kind of independence for him. Mark's eyes filled with tears as well. "You know, Jessica, I used to measure success by the size of my commissions. Now I measure it by the impact on people's lives." Jessica nodded, moved. "True wealth is in how you treat those who can't offer you anything." That phrase echoed in Mark's mind as he watched the crowded showroom. People from all walks of life with different abilities and limitations, all sharing the same space with dignity and respect, an environment he had helped create. That night, the once arrogant car salesman drove home transformed. His car was still the same, his address hadn't changed, but his eyes saw the world in a completely new way. And what about you? Have you ever judged someone by their appearance only to realize you were completely wrong? Or have you been unfairly judged for not looking important enough? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes, the deepest lessons come from the most unexpected places. And always remember, the true measure of a human being isn't in the car they drive or the clothes they wear, but in how they treat those who seemingly have nothing to offer. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of transformation and redemption like this one.